So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Barrister Raymond Broomhall, who ECSFR have been working with to stop the main arm NBN tower. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's a real privilege to be here, everyone, and thank you for welcoming me to country. I really feel honoured to be here before you all. This is the second time I've been here to speak to you all, and I don't know if any of you remember, but there was a Wilsons Creek Telstra Tower issue that was before, where I worked with ECSFR, and we were successful in stopping that tower. In my presentation that I'll give you after the hour is probably more important than what I'm probably about to explain to you today in the very first part. And the reason being is because it's just to explain to you exactly what 5G is and how dangerous it is, but not only that, to explain it to you in a totally different way, and it all makes sense. But what I'm going to do is also show the successes that I've had with my colleagues across the country, and you'll see how we've convinced councils. We convinced the Gold Coast City Council, the Sutherland Shire Council, the Randwick City Council, and the Byron Shire Council at the Wilsons Creek issue to all unanimously agree to stop certain towers, etc. But I'll explain that in a little bit more detail later. So I've been engaged again to assist ECSFR, which is the Environment and Community Safe from Radiation Incorporated, and it's a group of amazing members of the community who have got together and have realised the dangers and the issues in regards to non-ionising electromagnetic radiation. Now, what I've put together is mainly an issue in regards to a wireless base station, which is proposed, they're starting to build, by the way, at 655B Main Arm Road in Main Arm, and it's an NBN type arrangement. And I've just to give an idea, this advice, which is a legal advice, it's about 55 pages long. It hasn't been completed yet. I was just in conference with the Tweed Council, your council, with the Byron Shire about this, and we came across, again, away from that meeting quite positive. And really all my job is, and I've learnt that the trick is that a good lawyer will always put an argument together that the other side will look at it and go, we got no hope of winning this war, and they give up. And what I'm trying to tell you is that everything I've done hasn't ended in court appearances. Does that make sense? Yep. So we've convinced the council that, hey, it's over, folks. Don't bother prodding the tiger. And that's basically what I'm going to do now, is explain to you a little bit about what I've done in my advice. Now, what I've got to do with this advice yet is I've got to get it settled, and what that means is I'll get a senior QC to settle my work before I hand it over to the ECSFR and before it's handed to council and the telcos, or in this case NBN. Now, just to let you know who this gentleman, the person I'm going to get to settle it, and I'll explain that in my next presentation, exactly who that person is. And but just to let you know, I'm not here on my own. I do have some very big, heavy legal people behind me. And so I'm not just a person from the wilderness. If I can get Matt to stand up. Matt, can you just stand up? I'd like to introduce everybody to Matt. Matt is my protege. He works with me. And Matt knows all about this, and he's literally been my right-hand man in a lot of this. So thank you, Matt. And he's actually from New South Wales, so he resides here. So he's a great conduit for all of you in the future. So let's have a talk about main arm. Okay. Well, the issue here is that we've had some residents, and the trick is to get the residents to put together medical opinions from various doctors, and we've got one of the best medical advisors in Australia and possibly the world, and his name's Dr. Russell Cooper. And Dr. Cooper put together some advices in regards to people who are going to be emitted with radiation from the main arm tower. And we put that together as evidence to back up our claims against not only NBN, but also against the council themselves. And this comes down to criminal and civil liability, how I put this together. And this is how we stopped Wilson's Creek, and we tend to use the same process to stop main arm. So, the best way to explain this to you folks is so that you get a bit of an understanding of how this advice works. When you have a home, you have the right to what we call the quiet enjoyment of that property, which means that you, when you live in a property or own a property, when you reside in it, you have the freedom and the right that you've purchased from the Crown, because you're a tenant, what we call a tenant in common or a joint tenant. You have that right, and one of the main rights that you purchased was free from the interference from your neighbour, which basically means that your neighbour cannot interfere with your comfort or your enjoyment of that home. And if anybody does interfere with that, there are quite strict laws that apply to stop that from occurring. So let's have a little talk about what a tower really is about. It's not so much the tower that we're concerned about, it's the stuff that they're going to emit from it. So the stuff that they're going to emit from it is called non-ionising electromagnetic radiation. And it comes in two forms. It comes in RF and EMF. Now RF means radio frequency, and we also have ELF, EMF, which is extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields. So what is, you're not only getting RF signals, but you're also getting magnetic fields. And it's the magnetic fields that are the danger. And now you'll see when I explain it in the next presentation, you'll really understand where I'm coming from, okay? So, you've got a tower. Its whole purpose is to irradiate electromagnetic radiation from their property onto your property. Now, how does it interfere with your quiet enjoyment? Well, some people are what we call allergic or sensitive to electromagnetic radiation. Now, what I'm suggesting is that pretty much all of us are. When you're exposed to electromagnetic radiation, you become more sensitive the more you're in front of it or you're exposed to it. And you're going to find that electromagnetic radiation, the more you're exposed, the more sensitive you become, and there's no cure, okay? But what I work on is this, is I get you to go and see a doctor. The doctor works out that, looks at all the science, and then works out and says, okay, my opinion, as a doctor, I've looked at the science and I believe that the emissions from that tower pose an extreme risk of harm to health to you. And I'm going to explain why, and it's all to do with magnetic fields, which I'll explain later. So in essence, you're established a fear that this stuff is going to harm you because a doctor told you so, and you have a reasonable fear. And because you've got a reasonable fear, you're thinking, well, they're going to contaminate my land with this stuff that I don't want on my property with my, they certainly don't have my consent to do it, and it's forced upon me. What can I do? Well, there's various things that you can do, okay? One is you can literally get them charged, believe it or not, with assault. Now, you're probably thinking, hey, what? Assault is this, and the best way to explain assault and the principle of assault means this. Assault is the application of force without the consent of the other, okay? So just think of that for a moment. Applying force without the consent of somebody else against another person. That constitutes an assault. Now, there's a definite definition of what applied force means. And applied force means, quite simply, the application of light, heat, electrical energy, or any other form of energy, or any other force. So in essence, electromagnetic radiation comes under that principle. So in essence, you could, and you'll see it in the advice, is that technically they're constituting an assault. In this case, they haven't actually put it up yet, but a threat also constitutes an assault. And how it works is there's a few things we can do. One is we can prosecute under assault principles under the criminal code. We can simply go to the police, make a complaint that they're threatening to assault my premise or my home, and that's what's in this advice. Or I can ask for what's called an apprehended personal violence order, which is basically a restraint application, where you can actually ask the courts to intervene, because there's a real threat of harm not only to your person, but also to your house. Because if a doctor told you that being exposed to non-ionising electromagnetic radiation poses an extreme risk of harm, you have the right to say, well, stop. It's an interference. Not only that, it also creates damage to your home, so your home becomes uninhabitable. So not only can you claim and say, well, they're not only assaulting me in some form, but or threatening to assault, but they're also threatening to damage my home and contaminate my home so I can't live in it. Because the doctor told me if I was to live in it, it's going to cause harm to my health, or it's got the potential risk of causing that harm. So what else can be done? So you can do an apprehended personal violence order, and you can do a basic charge for assault if you wanted to go a different road. But there are other things that can be done. You can sue for nuisance, which basically means that you can put a shot over the bow and say, look, you're creating a nuisance, I want it stopped. But the beautiful thing about this is you can actually go up to your council and say, excuse me, council, my neighbour is making too much noise. Or they're burning tyres out in the backyard, which are causing me discomfort. I don't want it there. Or their grass is too long in their backyard. I want you to just cut it down and mow it down so I'm not there's vermin coming over the fence. That's called a nuisance. Noise is a good example of a nuisance. All right? So in this case, you basically explain to the council, excuse me, I've got a nuisance is about to affect me. They're about to irradiate me with this stuff, I don't want it. It's going to cause me discomfort. Here's my medical opinion that says it. Get rid of it. Okay? What you're asking the council to do is to abate it. That's what we call an abatement notice. And you can simply ask your council to issue one of those things. Now, if the council doesn't do it, that's where the interesting stuff happens. If they don't do it, you can do things like get what we call a mandatory injunction in the Supreme Court, forcing them to do their job to protect you. Or you can sue them in civil sphere under the thing what we call misfeasance in public office. And what that means is that if they're aware of a risk of harm, and you inform the council that there's a risk of harm, and they fail to do anything about it, you can sue them for misfeasance for any issue in regards to damage to your property. If you find you can't live in it, for example, you suffer from some form of anxiety because of it, etc., etc. So there's those sorts of things that you can shoot over the bow of your council. I'm not suggesting we do that, but that's the reality of what goes on. There are so many things that we can do. And I'm going to explain very shortly after we've had our Q&A as to exactly what happens. I'll explain the adverse health effects, I'll explain all the evidence that's out there, and I think you'll be very well educated as to exactly what's going on out there. How do you force the police to charge someone for assault? So let's imagine you go to the police officer and say, excuse me, I want to put in a complaint to the police, I want to go and do this, etc. And the police officer says, no, we're not going to do that, you're silly, we're not going to do that. Well, what's available to you is what's called a private prosecution. Anybody can file a complaint and issue a summons against somebody for breaking the law. And if you file a complaint, and anyone can prosecute a complaint. So don't think for a moment that only police can prosecute. Okay? So there's all sorts of things that can be done. So I guess, where are we situated at Maynarm? Well, they've already started construction. They've already had the medical opinions. They've already had plenty of notice from the residents saying this stuff's going to harm, stop. And they've completely ignored it. They've gone along and said, well, we're not listening to the medical advice, we don't care, we're going ahead anyway. Well, my next presentation is going to explain what happens if they do that and what happens there. So I guess that's where we're at, okay? So my advice, just so as you understand it, I think the next presentation will explain that a lot better. And I don't want to sort of duplicate, but that's really where we're at, okay? We're going to we've already put the council on notice. They already know, they've put the telcos on notice, they're about to be hit with a very detailed medical opinion, and hopefully that should do the trick. That should stop them. And what I'm saying to you is that usually they will realise we're not going to court, it's not worth it, okay? Anyway, so I hope that gives you a bit of an idea where we're going with main arm, all right? But when I explain everything, if there's any questions from the floor, just in regards to this, yes?
We know the property, but there's been no abatement on that road.
Not yet.
And they're about to seal it.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of biggies out there.
Well, okay, what I'm going to tell you is this. They can build as much as they want. That's not the concern. It's when they turn the thing on that's the concern. So, you know, they're spending all this money, that's up to them. That's not our problem. The issue is that the reality is that if it's a health risk, they know about it now, they're about to get an advice, and we'll see if they stop or not. If we issue an APVO against that particular person, or not issue it, applying court to actually have a restraint order put against that particular person, because they're in control of the land. So the best way to explain it is whose land actually is it? Well, it's actually that landowner's, and that's who we target. So all that stuff that I was talking to you about before in regards to the criminal issue and so on, and just so as you understand this, when people join together in a joint criminal enterprise, it's what's known as actioning a common purpose. They're all liable, every one of them, okay? If you have a marketing person gets in there, a contractor comes in, they all try and hide behind each other. They can't in this particular case. So in essence, what I'm saying is that, yes, the landowner's going to get a bit of it's going to get served with some documents, would be a better way of putting it. I guess it all just comes down to an education process, and that's all I'm going to do to you today, is hopefully you'll be educated as to what's going on, and then you will start to realise what's really happening, and then it's just a fait accompli. And that's how I do it. I just simply go up to the council, here's my advice, here's the medical opinion, I'll have a chat with you, what do you think? And they go, woo, we're getting out of here. We're objecting. That's how it works. It's as simple as that. It's just educating people.
And in Ray's next talk, you'll probably hear about how some councils who at the beginning were very sceptical are now working with Ray to support communities.
Oh, yeah, just to give you an idea, there's the Gold Coast City Council, for example, we unanimously agreed to knock back this Telstra tower, and which was great. We had a win. But then Telstra decided to say, well, we're going to appeal it. And little did they know that Telstra, because my clients were objectors, we become co-respondents in the appeal. So what it is we've got the council, the Gold Coast City Council, and myself and my clients working with the council to attack Telstra. And I'm going to bring in all my specialists and all my experts. I can't wait for that day. I'll tell you now, because we haven't had a chance to have a full precedent in court, because they're too scared to have it in court, because they know the game's over. And I think go for it. If you want to have an appeal, we'd love to. I can't wait. Can't wait. Anyway, that's what I'm saying. So if your council knocks it back, if they say, right, we object to the development, and we've already told them that we'll be a co-respondent in that, and we'll be right behind you. Don't worry about that. All right. Yeah, sorry.
I live just out of town, and next to my land is council land. They put up an Optus tower there, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, despite the fact that we said we didn't want it there. Just recently, the few residents that live on the road filled in a petition saying, no, we don't want this tower upgraded. we've gotten a letter back saying everything we're doing is within the law and we're only upgrading to 4G, and basically there's nothing you can do. So the council owns the land. I went to the council and went to council meeting and said we don't want it there. What are the legal options?
Okay. Well, for a start, is it the law? Are they allowed to do it by law? Well, they can say that, but the reality is they'll say, oh, we're merely applying the APANSA standards, we're following regulation, etc. And what we're about to see is that it's about to make a mockery of it. What can you do? Well, first of all, I think you really need to get some evidence, some expert evidence, usually in the form of a medical opinion, okay? Go and see preferably a lawyer or somebody to put a legal opinion together as to the law itself. You'll find in my next, in my presentation, I'll actually put up some assistance for you where there's some websites where I've actually given you a full list of what you can do from step 1 to step whatever. And just follow that to get your evidence together, and that's what you do, that's how you start, okay? I know this sounds... What I'm saying is the way to win the war, okay, is you just get a medical opinion that says that, look, I've had a look at this stuff and I think that it's not safe for you, okay? Now,
It's my observation from working in health for most of my life that doctors won't really put themselves on the line if it's going to cause them trouble.
well, what I'm going to show you is how you can convince your doctors that otherwise, because what I've got here is doctors can assess people for exposure to electromagnetic radiation. Just because a regulator is turning around saying, hey, this is how we've set the standards. What I'm trying to tell you is there's a totally separate standard for health throughout the world, and it's called the ICD-10, and there's a W90 classification which doctors use to diagnose and treat patients around the world. And it actually makes it very clear that exposure to non-ionising radiation is actually a health offence.
My question is, I did go to my doctor shortly after we found out about this stuff, and she was a great doctor, you know, treated me for my injuries at work, very confident doctor. First thing she said was, yes, we understand that flying on a plane, if you're a pilot, it's a higher risk of getting cancers, electromagnetic fields. Living under power lines, higher rate of leukemia for children, blah, blah, blah. I gave her the websites that, you know, I was told to give her to look at and that. 2 weeks later, I went back and she was jittery, clearing her throat. She couldn't look at me properly. She gave me the APANSA standard. I really felt like it was listening to Dr. Carl on the radio. Now, you know, I've never seen my doctor. I was treating me for 2 years like this, and you know, can they get pressured to tell that? You know, like she said to me, APANSA makes the standard, and we follow what APANSA says. That is a medical doctor.
Yeah. Okay. To answer that, thank you for that. Yeah, that's the reality that some doctors just think it's, well, I'm sort of breaching AMA, Australian Medical Association, or breaching some sort of conduct rule or whatever. The issue is once they're aware of what they can do, then you'll find that they become very open. And that's what I'm going to explain to you how to do it. And I can give you some redacted medical opinions. What I mean by redacted means I've taken out the personal identifiers as who the patient is, and I've got approval from this particular doctor, and you'll see how detailed it is, but it's really designed so another doctor can read it and then assess it and go, oh my God, oh, so that's what the doctor's saying. Oh, that makes sense. And that makes them a lot more confident to give a medical opinion, if that makes sense. All right, so I'll give you the tools of how to do that. That's what I'm going to do today. So what you take to your doctor, hey, look at this. And there's websites where I've put all this information for you. You just download it, take it to your doctor. All right?
And just to pipe up for a sec, the APANSA issued an advice to the Australian Medical Association, essentially saying that, you know, there's no risk of harm or evidence of harm. The Australian Medical Association then has provided that to all the doctors, and so that's where the doctors are getting their advice from. But I'll leave you with two questions because I'm not in the position to answer it. Number one is a PANZA, who are a bunch of scientists able to give medical advice, and Ray might answer that later. And number two is the federal government constitutionally responsible for health. So, next question.
Yeah, hi. My wife's actually so sensitive she couldn't be here today.
Sorry.
She might be able to watch this when she gets home either, when I get home, because she's too sensitive to actually do that stuff. Just some information that might be helpful is that our council actually moved a street light because she was so sensitive. We live in a cul-de-sac, the street light was out the front of our house. And we approached council with some medical advice, and they actually moved it, and they were very nice about it. That's just some information for people, because I agree that we tried to approach council this week and had a bit of a hiccup at the presentation, but we're actually going to do it in the next few weeks, which is a good thing. But the idea of what concerns me ongoingly, I know that we're talking about main arm and stuff, but generally with towers going up anywhere, how do individuals approach this? Like we've joined, Stop 5G Northern Rivers and SFR, and how do we do that as mere individuals? Because it's quite daunting. If someone's going to put a tower up the road, how do we approach that? And I know you've talked about a couple of things, but how do we legally go about that, and how can we finance that even? Yeah.
Okay. Well, financing it, there's, I guess you could say, well, particularly with the ECSFR, they've actually done, they're the ones that are financing me to do this advice. I'm only charging $2,500 for my entire advice on this. So what you'll find is that the doctor would probably be around the same price, probably a little bit more. But that's really the figure that you're looking at to have a successful, well, not a successful, but a very good campaign. And that's pretty much how it's being done, literally, in fighting. So we're not talking, we're not going to court, okay? And my job is to put up an advice that does the job, so you don't have to go to court, because I'll look at it and go, there's no point going, if you know what I mean. So I always have that in my mind when I do my advices. I hope that answers some of your questions there.
And Ray is generous enough that he allows us, in most cases, to put the stuff on the website. So the ECSFR website, stopping a tower, we have a lot of information on that from Ray. And ECSFR, because you'd appreciate, we're all volunteers, we're a small community group, where we do have a national crowdfund happening now. But what we're about, and it is a challenge, is we're about, you might call all these towers spot fires. So we're trying to be as strategic as possible and take the whole lot out with one hit. All right, so if we go to court with NBN, that will set a precedent nationally. So that's what we're about, setting national precedents. And once that's in place, then issues like yours will either disappear or be far easier.
Give an idea, just so you understand it, is look, you're not alone, and that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that there's a huge amount of work that's going on, not just the main arm, all around the country doing this sort of work, and really interesting developments in regards to schools and hospitals and you name it. In regards to the regulatory authorities, there's all sorts of things that are in the pipeline, and you'll start to see some of the successes I'm about to explain to you will sort of give you a very good indication of just how powerful this work is and how it does work. All right, so to give an idea, I stopped one particular small cell in one street. I had 30 other communities that needed my assistance, and I managed to get rid of the whole lot in one go. So it's all about being strategic and looking very carefully at what's out there and picking specific facilities that will do a lot more damage than just stopping that one little tower. This NBN thing that you've got, there's two fronts. I've got another NBN tower up in Peachester in Queensland, and there's this one here. And we intend to set a precedent with this one, all right? So I guess that's where I'm sort of coming from.
Yes, Ray, it's to do with, is there any time limitation on taking action? Let's say it was 5G or a similar situation that was causing harm, and it had already been in Australia for a decade, or you're taking action now and someone in a decade found out about that. How does that relate to the time limitation?
Well, the beauty of it is, if you follow the steps that you're going to be shown shortly, and the steps and what to do and etc., you're actually setting yourself up for future litigation. So you're basically putting the evidence together for, let's say in the future, they do find that it does, you know, you've got leukemia from it, or you've got some other cancer or something, there's markers that indicate that's exactly what happened. You've already put them on notice that it's going to harm. You've already had a doctor tell you that, and the doctor opinions will actually say it. So what I'm trying to say is that you're setting up for all sorts of future litigation. So that's all this is about, is setting you up ready for the future. That's what this is, yeah.
But what about an issue where you hadn't done that?
Well, then you really, all right, let's say you haven't done that, and
you didn't know for whatever reason.
And they're emitting right on you right now, you can stop them. You just simply do what I just said. You just basically go and get a medical opinion and, you know, prove that they're assaulting you, and off we go.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, so this applies not only for ones that they're about to build, but also ones that are already existing. And as you said, if they've been there for 10 years, well, too bad. We can still apply the same work against that, yes.
I wanted to ask about councils and how they relate to this situation. You may have, for example, a small cell which is regarded as a complying development, in which case, under the mainstream paradigm, the council has a lack of ability to act. Can you explain a little bit about how councils can vote on these things or take action?
With pleasure. Okay, how it works is this. You've got what we call, you're talking about a compliance issue, but you also got low impact and high impact. You'll find that some of the work I'm about to show you, particularly with Randwick City Council and the Southern Shire Council, they were all didn't need development applications. So the council had nothing to do with it. All right? But I convinced the council to still object. And that's what I'm going to talk about. But I won't give the game away, but that's exactly what I did. All right? So that answers your question. So this Maynarm one, for example, doesn't have a development application. So the council don't actually have any say, particularly on the development, but they can abate through public nuisance and also on health grounds. And that's where I'm coming from. So, but we'll get to that shortly.
I just wanted to ask, if there is nothing wrong with me, I'm not sensitive, can I still have a case?
Yes, you can. Because all it comes down to is you go and talk to your doctor, and all you do is you go to the doctor and say, excuse me, doc, they're about to put a tower up here, or they've already got one there, and I've just been looking on the internet, and it sort of says that it poses a risk of harm to health. All I want you to do, doctor, is tell me, is it safe? That's all I want you to do. Excuse me, doctor, I'm your patient. Can you advise me? Should I be exposed to this stuff or shouldn't I be? And that's what you're doing. Of course you've got a case. Yeah.
Ray, you said earlier that even though you might not be sensitive now, the more you're exposed, the more you are...
Yeah, I'll explain that. So the more that you're exposed, the more you get sensitive to it. And I'm going to do some demonstrations to explain to you exactly how it works, actual physical ones, and you'll actually get to feel electromagnetic radiation and just how insidious it really is. Yes?
I'm just wondering whether it's not possible to bring charges on behalf of a community conspiracy to undermine public health.
Okay. What you've done there is, well, that's sort of covered in some form. I'm not saying that that's what's going on, but what I'm saying is misfeasance in public office certainly covers that.
I just know that it is a very effective tool because I've used it myself in the past against the Prime Minister that stopped the mining of Coronation Hill.
Excellent. Well done. We'll have to have a little chat. Excellent. Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Wow.
I live just over 100 metres from the Tweed Hospital.
Okay.
And I have been, since I've moved there, at treating fibrillation.
Oh.
Now, my husband has also got prostate cancer since we've been there the last 3 years. Now, okay, moving forward, we stop all the councils. What happens in a few years' time when Russia, well not Russia, but Australia, US and China have their satellites beaming down?
I've got the answer for you, and I know I've worked out how to stop them. So I'm going to explain that to you, all right? Yes, we're going to learn about satellites, and I'm going to show you what's going on. I'll show you the law and show you exactly, and it's a very simple process to explain that. Yes, I'll show you exactly how it's all, yep, got all that under control. Yep. Okay, who's next? Yep. That's why we got the meaty stuff's about to come. We're just going to have a little chat about main arm here, but the real good stuff's in here. Yep. Okay.
If I may, speaking of hospitals, yes, so I'll probably just say there are apparently workplace health and safety implications, and maybe the telecommunications code doesn't override that.
There's hospitals, okay, what alarmed me, I had a patient who's actually dying of cancer, and she's probably got about a week to go, and I know she'll be watching this, and she has EHS, and she used to carry her mobile phone in her little, you know those little bags that you have around your ladies carry, you put your little mobile phone right there, it was right next to her ovaries. Anyway, she ended up getting ovarian cancer, and not very good, and put 2 and 2 together, and she's extremely EHS, which means she's extremely electromagnetic hypersensitive to any Wi-Fi and routers. And the issue was that she was going to hospital to get treatment for her cancer, and they're putting her directly underneath Wi-Fi routers and all sorts of things, which were basically exacerbating her condition, and it got to the point it was intolerable for her to even go to hospital. So that's when I was asked to get involved, and how it worked is that we put the hospital on notice. We got a medical opinion. She had plenty of them anyway, as you can imagine, as to her sensitivity. And we asked the recommendations that she not be put under Wi-Fi routers and everything. Whilst that was going on, the hospital was basically responding and saying, yes, we're doing everything we can. We thank you for the work, and you know, we're taking that on board. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure the Wi-Fi router's not there. We understand the health implications, and we'll do what we can. I then found that just after that process, the state government had introduced, this is in New South Wales, had introduced free Wi-Fi in paediatric wings in hospitals. A pilot program for our little kids in the hospital, knowing full well that the medical opinion they got indicated the dangers to it. So what did that necessitate? Okay? Well, quite frankly, a complaint to APRA, which is if you have a medical complaint, and that's basically we went down on that alley to see what we could do to help that lady. But the reality is that, look, this stuff, when you finally, I'm not saying that that's what caused her cancer. That's not what I'm saying at all. There's a risk or a possibility it could have been. But the reality is that this poor lady is not well, and she's in palliative care as we speak. And this is where the reality kicks in, folks. This thing is real, all right? I'm about to tell you the science and the medical stuff to explain it, and what the World Health Organisation hasn't told you, what APANSA hasn't told you, what ICNIRP hasn't told you, what your telcos haven't told you. You'll see it all here, and it all goes to satellites. It goes to all sorts of things. And once you understand it, you'll be then armed and ready to make a decision as to where you want to go next.
Thank you, Ray. So just to wrap up, I just want to assure everyone that because I know there's been some concerns, understandably, that we are moving forward with main arm, the NBN tower. This is happening, and not everything necessarily happens as quickly as people would like, but please be assured that we are doing everything we can.
Can I say something? In order for this to work, we have to show, and this is what we've been waiting for, is we have to show that the telco has totally disregarded our medical evidence. Okay, now how do you do that? Well, one, they either admit and say, look, we don't care, we're going to proceed with the construction anyway, without your, but we haven't got that in writing. Do you get where I'm coming from? So we need evidence to indicate that they're completely ignoring the medical opinions. And that's what they're doing. So the more they build, the more it shows that they're completely ignoring it. Once this legal advice gets to them, it'll show that they're still building, then we can act. Because that's really, this is about building evidence ready for striking, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying, it's actually a good thing that they started the building, because we can then, it's a clear admission that they're going ahead regardless.
Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you. Thank you. So if we give Ray a break, if everyone feel free to mingle, have a tea or coffee, and at 3 o'clock we'll reconvene and hear the next part. Thank you.